Okay, so it's funny, when I first started doing this, I like changed shirts all the time to make it look like it was different days, and now I don't care. So this question comes from Spencer, um, which was a really good question. I'm sorry it took me so long to get back to this, because this question came up after I spoke about our withdrawal from Afghanistan. And it's a really good question. So Spencer asks, since the government trained and funded the Mujahedin and created a ripple effect where a majority of the group became Taliban, do you think American government has some responsibility for how the future events played out to how they are today? Yes. Okay, there's your simple answer. But I want to talk about it in a bigger context, as I often do. But I want to make sure that I give you a straight answer. And the straight answer is yes. Obviously, we have something to do with it. The difficulty is we're always looking at these things backwards. Okay? It's really easy to look from now backwards and go, how did what they were doing then, isn't it our fault because we did that and it led to this horrible thing? The thing is, we're really good at looking at that when it's negative, but we don't tend to spend any time looking at it when the things we did were positive. Okay? So, to be fair, it works out both ways. So, I think the question ends up being couched in a bigger sense. The bigger sense is, should we be involved in foreign locations influencing, trying to influence the political or reality on the ground in places outside the United States? Should we be involved in anything outside the United States? Because that's really what the greater question in this is should we have been involved in Afghanistan or Iraq or the Middle East in the total and so forth? And the answer is there's really not another choice. And the answer is we're going to be involved in some way or another. What do I mean by that? So it's an old school concept that's been tried and been brought forth in America a few times over our history. If you look throughout the entire history of the United States, going all the way back to pre-1776. If you go all the way back, there's been constant discussion of, should America be protectionist? Should America decide nothing outside of our borders matters? And the answer to that today, stronger than maybe ever in all of history, is that's impossible, because we exist in a world economy. And so because our economy cannot be separated from the world, that's impossible today. It's not how economics work. Thus go things in Europe, or thus go things in Asia, so goes with us. You can't have a major economic crisis in Europe and have it not affect America. You can't have major crisis in the Middle East and have it not affect America, because since the Industrial Revolution, oil has mattered. And because of it, even if we were to say all of our oil is only going to come from inside America, it's still priced based upon world markets, and so it's still involved with the rest of it. So the instability of the Middle East is problematic for us. And it would be naive for us to stand back in its entirety and say, we're just going to let what happens in the rest of the world happens. When the fact that even though we are huge and powerful, we're not bigger than the rest of the world combined. We're not even the biggest in any sense in the world. We are not the biggest in most numbers. We're not the biggest in area. We're not the biggest in resources. We're just a player on the stage of everything else. And so by default, you care about what's happening outside. Because if you don't care about what's happening outside, you are purely a receiver of. You are passive. You are a victim of whatever's going on. And so it's, and I believe that in positive ways as well as negative. There are people who have this idea of America and the border, we shouldn't go beyond the borders, that are so absolutist in that idea that when you have a massive natural catastrophe someplace, we go, we don't have anything to do with that. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when Haiti gets destroyed or the Philippines or whatever. You have massive tsunamis. No, we don't care. That's totally not human. That is inhuman to take people, especially people who are economically disadvantaged compared to you. I'm sorry, Afghanistan drew the shit stick in the international lottery of great places to exist in the world. They did. When the world moved to industrialization and modernization of what we know of in the world today, they had drawn a total blank in what it takes to become a modern society. They drew a zero. They have no resources of any significant value in the modern world as we know it today. And yet, there are millions of people who live there. Because of that, you take millions of people living someplace who are destined by the lottery of life to abject poverty. That is a recipe for problems for the rest of the world. Because you take a group of people who have no options and leave them there destitute, their freedom will infringe on our freedom. Because eventually they won't stay there. They will reach out. They will, and it's a place that has been massively influenced by the worst of human nature. The ability, almost the only thing that can get you to the top, that rises you up. And as a human being, when we rise up to the top, we rise up based upon certain things. We rise up because of influence, because of power, because of the ability to influence others. And we influence others in positive ways by trying to communicate like these sorts of things, or we do them in negative ways by force over the lesser. And so human nature strives to be greater than the previous generation, all these sorts of things. Well, if you're in a place where there are no tools to do that, one of the only ways to rise economically, socially, to the top is by lording it over the others. The Middle East has been rife with that, with the modern world's inability to advance in other ways. Now, you find that in Iraq, it's a somewhat different situation because they have one of the golds of today, black stuff they pump out of the ground. But Afghanistan didn't win that war. They didn't draw that card. They didn't draw oil out of the deck. They drew nothing out of the deck. They drew opium out of the deck. Woo, we can grow poppies, a wildflower that'll grow in the desert. We can make things that'll get you stoned. And oh, by the way, that was powerful for a while. That was pre-industrial revolution. That was a powerful thing. That gave them influence over much of the world around them. Going out thousands of miles from them, that gave them a center of power that allowed them to have economics and all of these sorts of things. But we've decided in the modern world, those aren't valuable things. We've decided that's not what we want societies to be based upon, is the enslavement of the mind through drugs. And so we go, okay, so they're trying to get along in a world that gave them nothing. And that's lots of the world. That's lots of the world. Whether it's you drew the card of tiny, okay? I'm a little bitty nation in the middle of nowhere. I'm an island in the middle of the water. How do I join the modern world? Well, am I big enough to have a big airport, and can we stick hotels around it and draw in people who give us their money so that they can sit on the beach and do nothing? Everybody's trying to find, how do we bring something to the world? And because of the decisions that are happening around every other nation in the world affect us, we have a vested interest in what's going on. We have a vested interest in these multiple ways, whether it be humanitarian based. We care. As a nation, we give away more money than anyone else on the whole planet by huge amounts. And when we do it, some of the times it's just purely to keep them alive. And sometimes it's done to get them to not vote against us in the United Nations. It's okay. That's part of what's going on. We're playing ball with the rest of the world. And so how do you play ball? And that's the great questions. The great questions are, how do you involve all of these sorts of things? So you go back and you start looking at our involvement in Afghanistan, all those sorts of things. When you look at the whole Middle East, it's a very complex thing. And we didn't make it easier by the fact that after millions of Jews were killed, we decided the best thing for them was to give them back the place that they came from and sent them all into a place where everyone hates their guts and carved out a space and says, there, that's for you, the Jews. And everybody hates them. So that was, I don't know that we had another choice. I can't go back to the late 1940s to be a part of that decision, but it's there. You take that and the tentacles of that and how that goes out across the Middle East, the ideas of economics, of the fact that the Middle East being a powder keg for hatred around the world means that if you leave it as an open space and you do nothing there, then people who have nefarious purposes, people who hate us, will utilize that as a place to attack us without attacking us directly. It's amazing how when we walked out of Afghanistan, China walked right the hell in. They walked in right behind us. China is already saying we should welcome the Taliban to the table of the United Nations. Why? Because they're trying to be the primary player there, and they're looking for anybody who hates our guts who will walk up and rubber stamp anything they say. So you're getting a coalition of the hated evil forces of the world. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan. Let's throw them in there. Look, it's another vote on the table, and we stuff it in there and go, okay, so have we been trying to influence what's going on there? Yes, hell yes, we have been, and still are, by the way. I am certain that behind the scenes we are, even with this wackadoodle administration who doesn't seem to be knowing at all what's going on outside of, I'm not sure they know anything. I'm not sure he knows anything that's going on. But I've got to believe that at least in the State Department and at least within our security administrations and so forth, we are still caring about what's going on there. We're still trying to influence things that are going on there. But it's because for your own survival, you have to. You have to have something involved. Now, when you try something and it goes wrong, do you bear responsibility for it? Absolutely, you bear responsibility for it. But what other choice did they have? Okay? We are human beings. I don't know human beings who bat 1,000 in anything. In anything. And think about how difficult it is, something like influencing a difficult environment like that, when every 4 years the people in charge may change. Can you imagine being out there in the world where you're supposed to be our friend in an environment where most people hate our guts, and anything we say only lasts until the next administration pops in, and that administration is willing to say, screw you, and walk away? Welcome to Afghanistan and what we just did. We just took thousands of people who risked their lives for us, translated for us. Hell, they cleaned our damn toilets there for years. That put a damn target on their head because they were willing to interact with us. And we said, don't worry, we will take care of you. You help us, we will help you. And then the current administration said, screw you, and left and said, sorry, we don't have time to get you all out. We set this date and we're all leaving. And if you're not on the airplane by then, well, tough. I mean, a whole lot of you are Americans, but all the rest of you too. Screw you. Okay, how the hell does the next group of people get anybody in the world to believe a damn thing we say after that? So start with that as your bag of tools you're going to work with, and try to end up with something in a place like Afghanistan or Any place in the Middle East. I was going to, the half a name of a country popped out of my mouth, but I stopped because I knew I was going to mispronounce it, whatever it was. Doesn't matter. Try taking whole regions like that. It's the same thing. Try dealing with the remains of the Balkan states in their influence between us and Russia. Soviet Union goes away. You have a whole set of countries that are sitting between NATO and Russia's influence and trying to get them to land on the side of good rather than evil. We're going to have places we succeed and places it's going to fail. And so the only other choice is to say, nope, I'm taking my ball and going home, and I'm not going to care about anything that's outside of there, and I don't, and I don't know how you do that. I just don't think it's a viable possibility. And one of the difficult things about this is the people who are responsible for making the decisions about who we support and what we do and how we go about it today will not be around 20, 30 years later when it goes good or goes to shit. You take something like our involvement in Afghanistan over the last 50 years and go, who do you hold responsible for what didn't work or what did work? A lot of them are dead. Does that mean we stop trying anything? I don't know. I think this is, in many ways, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. You've got to try. The tools are difficult. You can't see the future. You're playing, it's not just go there and do something. You're playing against other people who have the opposite goals of you. And you end up with what you end up with. And the only other choice is do nothing. And I just have never understood how do nothing is an option. That the consequences, there are going to be consequences if you do nothing. Let me try to give one other example. It's the concept of that I was a soldier. I was a soldier for all these years. And so it became more poignant to me, people who claim to be anti-war, just anti-war. That's all. And the problem is that's all they are. They're just anti-war. They are not pro-solution of any choice whatsoever. Their solutions are from fairy tales. Can't we all just get along? There's no good reason for a war. That's great. All the good people would agree with you. The problem is the world contains evil people. Hitler is not on board with you. Hitler would totally join your anti-war movement. He doesn't want a war. He just wants you to give him everything. That's what he wanted. If you would just bow down and let him take it all, he would agree to no war. Well, unless you're a Jew, he's going to murder them, or unless you're physically or mentally handicapped, or unless you're gay, or unless you're... Those people, but they're not people, so it's okay. He didn't think they were people, so he can murder all of them. That was okay. See, are we going to give in to people like that? Is that what we're going to do? Because that's exactly what you decide to do. And I always started with those people and said, okay, anti-war. If you want to be against my war, okay. But if I'm going to talk to you about it, let's start with this. Tell me a war you stood behind. A war that you think should have been fought. And I'm sorry, if you can't think World War II was a war worth fighting, then you don't get to be in the conversation. Certainly not with me. You're not worth talking to. You are just too stupid to have the conversation with. Because bad guys won't play by your rules. Bad guys will not sign on to that. They will take your weakness and use it to destroy you. And so it has to happen. So it means we have to play. We have to participate in the world, because otherwise you just become a victim to whatever's going to happen. The world is a very complex place. And the reality of it is where you have to try to play along, especially if you're going to exist in the upper echelon of the socioeconomics of the world, which we have been blessed with. If we're going to do that, and if we're going to stay there, we have to be playing along with the rest of the world. And that means sometimes you're gonna screw it up. And it's going to have been set out with the right idea, and you're going to have tried to do the right things, and you might have gone about it the right way. But remember, we're not playing alone. And that there are individuals who want us dead. And they're trying to see to it that it all works out a different way. So are we responsible? Yes. We played in the game. We supported people who turned into other people. Is it our fault? No. We have some responsibility. Why? Because we gave power to a group of people who then were influenced to become a different group of people. And they become the Taliban. What are we trying to do today? We're trying to influence the Taliban to become a different group of people than the ones who attacked us. The ones who are murdering their own people. The ones because they can transform as well. It's one of the interesting possibilities is the Taliban suddenly is in charge and on the world stage really like they've never been before, and now the whole world's watching. And the question is, it's way easier to kill people and tell people what they can't do than it is to keep the lights on and to keep the water flowing. And if there's a nugget of humanity inside them, they're in a country full of people who have known the greatest level of economic advancement and the modern world and telecommunication and water and power and all these sorts of things at a level they have never seen before. And if the Taliban does not want to be victim of their own people, they suddenly have to keep all that going. And the question is what influence does that have on them? What influence does it have on them? Will they become something other than what they've been in the past? Because for their own survival, they either have to rule by utter crushing of opposition, or they have to succeed just like anybody else who takes charge of everything else. Are they going to fall entirely back into the Dark Ages? Time will tell.